Hello, everyone. I am Meg Howe. I am the Director of Product Trust at Zendesk. But today I'm going to tell you a story about experience I had while working at Strava, responding to quite a fun incident. So I have many lessons learned from my experience, and I hope to impart some wisdom and knowledge from my experience that you might be able to use in your work days or maybe personal life. So before I jump into it, quickly introduce myself. This is my life in logos to the right. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri. I attended Santa Clara University where I got my degree in electrical engineering. And I actually started my career out in the hardware space. So some of you might remember the Palm Pilot. They created the iPhone competitor, and this was back when BlackBerry ruled the smartphone world. So I worked on that phone right there on the left. Sadly, did not compete well against the iPhone, but then transitioned over to working at Texas Instruments. Most of you are probably familiar with the calculators. I joke that I worked to make sure that the sixes were not confused with the nines, but in fact, I worked on the semiconductor side, so everything that goes inside of those electronics. And then I kind of switched into the software world and also focused in product management. So I started a company called II Wisdom, and that was quite the ride where I wore many hats, but my focus was building the technology and defining the product. We got acquired and I transitioned over to Zendesk, where I started my career in the security development, abuse prevention, and trust space. So many fun stories there, building security features, defending the product against spammers, etc. And then moved out of the Bay Area to work at Strava, where I started the trust and safety team there. Had a short stint at a company here in Denver called Guild Education, and then I boomeranged back to Zendesk, where, as I mentioned, I am the Director of Product Trust. So I actually work within the security organization, but I ensure that the product is incorporating security, compliance, and privacy into the feature. So I work really closely both with my teammates in security, but also the product and engineering teams to make sure that their roadmaps incorporate security and privacy. And the most important thing is I have an adorable puppy. Well, she's not really a puppy anymore. She's 2.5. Her name is Suri. That's a picture of her. And yeah, hopefully she doesn't walk through the door. If you see like the door creepily opening and you don't see anyone, that's her coming in to say hello. So without further ado, I realize we're not in person, so humor me for a minute. Maybe say something in the comments, but raise your hand or comment in the chat if you have gotten a job offer that you were extremely excited about. You told everyone about it. You're so excited to join. So I obviously can't see you, but I'm sure either you're mentally raising your hand or physically raising your hand. But I too, much like most of you, I'm sure, have, received a job offer from the company of my dreams, which was Strava. And for those who don't know, Strava is a fitness tracking app for runners and cyclists, and it's an opportunity for you to share your activities. It's community based, so people can share activities, routes. People can what they call kudos, so it's encouraging and liking and thumbs upping your activities, etc. So as a runner and cyclist, I was very excited to get this job offer to start the trust and safety team. I was moving to Denver, creating the Strava office out there. The culture of running with your colleagues was completely normal. I was working on a product that I loved to use. And my boss was actually the former CTO of the Hillary Clinton campaign. So, major girl boss, was so excited to be working for her. So got the job offer, was so excited, messaged all my friends, my family, immediately accepted, probably accepted too soon. I probably should have played it a little bit cool, but I couldn't help myself. So accept the job offer, and 2 days later, I get a text from my friend. And he says, have you seen the Washington Post article, Strava's in deep blank? I won't use that word because it's a cuss word and I'm trying to be G-rated here, but it wasn't good. So I'm already on my phone. It's a Sunday morning. I go on Washington Post's website, and the first thing I see front and center is this article. U.S. soldiers are revealing sensitive and dangerous information by jogging. They don't name Strava in the headline, but in the second paragraph, Strava is very much mentioned. This caught fire. It was everywhere. The New York Times even picked it up. They called out Strava in the title, how Strava's heat map uncovers military bases. So they jumped on the bandwagon and they took it even further. They had an interactive video experience explaining the situation. And so they really saw a great opportunity for, headline grabbing, attention grabbing, etc. So to take a step back, what is the Strava heat map? So the way that they describe it, it shows the heat made by aggregated public activities over the course of a year throughout the world. So it's actually a really neat tool for cyclists and runners to discover new routes, or if they're visiting new cities, to see different areas for them to run and ride based on what others are doing in the Strava community and sharing those activities. So as you might imagine, in the Middle East, for example, military folks were tracking their runs on military bases. And so because there was activity in that area, it was showing up. And if you go to the heat map today, you can see certain areas are, there's not a lot of heat. And so it's quite obvious that in certain countries, those areas were getting a lot of heat from the military base. So it was revealing that sensitive information. So needless to say, I jumped in day one, and, I will say most folks would probably see this, see the headlines and freak out of, what am I doing? Did I sign up for the right job? What is this company doing? Is this the right thing? For me, I was ecstatic. I saw this as an opportunity to really focus our efforts on not only responding immediately, but I had this awesome opportunity where I was building the trust and safety team, which was responding directly to things like this, ensuring data was controlled, it was safe, people had control over their information and data, etc. So I was so excited. And I think a lot of us in, the security world, we're used to responding to emergency situations. And for me, and maybe for most of you too, it's exciting to kind of get into that space where you're being thrown into emergency situations, you're figuring out, how to respond, etc. So there was, of course, the immediate response, but there was also the opportunity to use this to lay the groundwork for the team that I was building. So the immediate response consisted of an in-product messaging. So you see the overlay on the global heat map on the left, and that was just to kind of inform users what the global heat map was, how to opt out, awareness of the privacy settings, and it also linked to the blog post, which was the public response from our CEO at the time. So he had released a blog post to the athletes and to the rest of the world to let them know that, we acknowledged the situation. We were working closely with the government and the military, the US military, to, address these concerns. It also introduced a new persona that the Strava product hadn't been thinking about. They were focused on runners and cyclists, folks that run frequently, or folks that, didn't run a lot, but they, did a lot of cycling, etc. So the idea of, okay, we need to think about a completely new persona was brought on the table. And then there were product changes made to the heat map. So those included monthly updates to the heat map to reflect any activity opt-outs. So if someone had changed an activity from public to private so that only they could see that activity, it would no longer be contributed towards the heat map. There was also a minimum threshold of uploads required to show heat. So that really addressed kind of the issue of if one or two people were active in an area, it shouldn't show up until, there's a larger amount of activity and folks uploading to that area. And then we added a little bit of friction. So someone had to create an account in order to zoom into street level. And that was another security and privacy aspect that we thought would make our customers, our athletes, comfortable with the heat map. But as I mentioned, that was the immediate response, but we were able to use this to lay the groundwork for the trust and safety team's mission and vision. So in addition to the heat map incident and learning how we ended up where we did with that situation, we did a bunch of research. We went through feedback through forums, feature requests, support tickets mentioning privacy and security concerns, looked up the press that we had around our privacy settings, and they did exist. And we talked to athletes. We wanted to understand what their comfortability was with sharing information. And we identified 3 main problem statements. The first one was that the privacy settings were confusing. We had this setting called enhanced privacy, and it wasn't really clear what that actually meant. The toggles weren't clear when you enabled something. What does that actually mean? Am I opting in as something? Am I opting out? The second one was that we at Strava were not actively updating privacy features. There wasn't a team dedicated to this work. It was more of an afterthought. Fortunately, Strava had invested in the idea of building out the trust and safety team even before that headline went live. The timing was very ironic that it happened that way. But we were building out a team to make sure we were focused on updating the privacy features and the security aspects around the product. And the last one was that there was general lack of awareness. So some features only existed on the website, even though the majority of our users solely use Strava in the mobile form. We had these settings, but they, weren't necessarily clear that they existed, or, to get there, you had to go through settings, etc., which I guess is pretty normal. But without the awareness, people weren't aware of what they were sharing. This also allowed me to kind of identify the 3 foundational aspects of building trust in a product. And these are what I call the 3 pillars of trust. And this is the biggest lesson I've learned from all of the work that I've done in security and privacy over the years. And it comes down to transparency. I like to even call this thoughtful transparency. So it's one thing to have things documented, but if it's hidden somewhere or if it's not easily accessible, then is it really transparent? You also want to, make sure it's contextual for the user. So, where the user is, living in your product, in your app, that information should be relevant to where they are and how they involve themselves with the product. The second one is consent. So it's really about allowing users to decide what they want to share without degrading their experience. All users have different comfortability as it relates to sharing data and information, and they shouldn't be reprimanded for not wanting to share data. So that was a huge part of, building products for me within the trust and safety and security space, is that, customers not only should have the option to share, but they should be able to share without having a huge impact to their experience. And the last one is control. So that's really giving users the ability to make the right decision for them. Again, everyone is, very different on how they want to show up and how they want to share data. And so we should allow for the flexibility for folks to show up the way that they want to. So what does this actually look like? Like, words are good, 3 pillars of trust, yeah, you could talk about that, but what does that actually mean in practice? What does that actually look like? So in practice, transparency. So for the Strava example, we wanted to be transparent to the user while also being contextual. So this example is what I call the pizza slice ride that I do. So looking at this route, this activity, I've shared it to my followers. So you can see on the bottom, I'm informed that only my followers can view this activity. So I know how it shows up to me, but it's not clear without seeing that how others see this. So the other thing is it informs me that I won't appear on segment leaderboards, and it may not count towards some challenges. So that does give me some insight into how this impacts my product experience as a whole. The other thing is Strava has a feature called privacy zones where you can hide, sensitive information like your home, your office, etc. If you, run around there, if you bike around there and you just want to hide that information. So again, for me, I see the full route, but I have a privacy setting around a privacy zone around my house. So this shows me that the start and end were hidden, and I can see that with the gray on the map. So the second one is control. I had mentioned the old experience of the privacy settings in Strava. It's very confusing. We have that unclear feature of enhanced privacy. I mean, you can click and learn more, but what does that actually mean? What is hidden? What isn't? Again, it's unclear what a toggle would do. Does it enable it? Does it disable features? Who am I sharing to? If I'm private by default, where am I showing up? And the wording was actually different from what you saw on the website and what you saw in the mobile form, which is very weird and inconsistent and just not a great experience for all. So the new experience gives the user a clear, snapshot of where they're showing up. So whether that's the profile page, activities, group activities, etc., and who can see. So I can go there immediately and see, okay, everyone can see if I'm in a group activity. Only followers can see my profile page. So people have to request to follow me in order to view my profile page, etc. And then you can click into those sections and update it. And the other nice thing is it's all in one view. And the other one, you had to scroll down to get to all the different privacy features. So again, this is not only, being more transparent, but it's also giving folks the control in a way that they can understand it and speaks to them. And the last one is consent. So with the timing of GDPR, we were able to incorporate consent into the sign-up flow. I know some of you might, if you work with other product teams or developers, engineering teams, etc., convincing them to work in security or privacy features when they're focused on other things can be hard. So we saw this as a really great opportunity with GDPR, we had to have all of our existing users opt in for us to share marketing, use their health data, etc. So we were able to incorporate it into the sign-up flow that was actually owned by another team. One thing, there's you have to consent or you don't. So you either allow or decline. You can learn more information, etc. But what I want to call out too is the updated terms of service. We made the decision to have a full page that was dedicated to describing our terms of service and laid them out in bullet points. So they're easy to read. It wasn't a lot of legalese. Whereas a lot of accounts, a lot of sites that you sign up for today, you either have to click a box or, it's just kind of hidden the terms of service. And so we wanted folks to know that what our terms of service actually conveyed. One other thing that we had done, which may be a bit nerdy, but we did a nutritional facts version of our privacy policy. That's available on the Strava website if you're interested. But it just kind of gives you the quick snapshot of what our privacy policy consists of without going through a bunch of documentation. So it's like, does Strava sell your data? Does Strava do background checking, et cetera? It would give like a yes or no. And for the record, Strava does not sell data and they do not do background checking. So it was just a great way to show like we're transparent in the information that we, collect from you and how we use it, et cetera. So, obviously my experience is different from yours and everyone else's, but the three pillars I defined with transparency, consent, and control are something that I've used in my job since Strava. So, I was even using it back in the day when I was at Zendesk before, and I absolutely use it today at Zendesk, even though I'm in the B2B space. So, I'm working with more enterprise level customers, whereas before I was working in the B2C space, I was working with the consumers, individuals, etc. So with that in mind, these are some questions to ask yourself when you're building trust with your user base. And that can be, you can apply this in so many different ways, as I do, as I just mentioned, with like the different users you're talking to. So is the user sharing sensitive information? For Strava, this was location was very sensitive. There was also, other sensitive information like heart rate data that users could share into their activities. For you, that might be location, but it could also be, PII, like name, address, social security number, etc. So are they sharing the sensitive information? Do they know they are sharing the sensitive information? So if they're unaware that they're sharing the sensitive information, and it's kind of a surprise if they find out that they've been sharing information, that's just not a good experience, not only for your users, but the trust that they have in you as you've built out and they've entrusted you with the product that you were working on. So at Strava, we had this thing called creepy kudos. So if you had shared your activity unknowingly to everyone and someone you didn't know liked it, it's a really icky feeling, especially when there's location information associated with it. So the third one is, are you providing them context for potential risk where it's most relevant to them? So I even think about Zendesk, like a Zendesk admin. Do they know the risk if they choose a lower threshold for the password requirements? Do they understand when they set that, what is the risk to them? And do they know it as they're going through the settings and updating that? The next one is, are you dependent on them reading terms of service to provide important security related information? This goes back to the transparency. If you're not sharing the information in a way that doesn't require them to dig for it, then that just doesn't feel right to building that trust with the user. And last, is the user able to control what they share? And if they do, does the more secure option degrade the user experience? I kind of highlighted this before with like the consent aspect, but the user shouldn't be reprimanded for not wanting to share data. We're all on different aspects of how we want to show up, how we want to share data, and we should give that flexibility to our users and our customers. And finally, I would be terrible if I didn't give some advice on how you can protect your privacy. Again, all of us feel different about how we show up and how we share information. And it should be our right to, control our data and how we show up, especially in the day of the internet. So the three things I would say, the first is the defaults for sharing information is typically set to public. You should definitely check these settings, especially location, to see if you're sharing information or not. Again, this is for social media sites. This is for really, Venmo. You might be sharing like information when you do a Venmo transaction with someone. And it could also be, at the enterprise level as well. Like, are you sharing information from within those accounts? I definitely recommend checking for that because the defaults are typically set to public. The second one is be careful about sharing patterns of life. So, with the Strava example, there's running and biking. And so making sure people can't track where you are at all times. Something like Instagram, you're allowed to share locations with photos. So something to just be aware of. And last, I know this sounds kind of rough, but read through terms of service before creating an account. There's a lot of information in there about how a company uses your data, and sometimes it includes them selling it, them using it for ways that you might not feel comfortable. So avoid the Charlie, the chocolate factory situation where you're signing that off and you're not even reading the information. So with that, thank you for coming and listening. And If anyone wants to connect, I've added my QR code for LinkedIn. My name is Margaret Howe on LinkedIn. So in case you can't find me, and that's it. So thank you.